Like and subscribe right now, or this spider will crawl on your face while you're sleeping.
10 best treasure hunting tales ever. The notion of a priceless treasure lost to mankind is so inherently romantic. It has powered 4 Indiana Jones movies, and literally thousands more still following the same pattern of finding a lost treasure to this day. Nothing could be cooler for most of us than uncovering a missing relic, no matter how impossible that might be. Or is it? In the last few years alone, academics, historians, and ordinary Joes have stumbled across enough lost treasures to fill an entire museum. But what can really be counted as a true treasure? Is it jewelry or gold, stashed away by someone in the past who was unable to recover it, or something more meaningful? Well, you're about to find out. Here are 10 best treasure hunting tales of how we were able to find some lost pieces of priceless treasure. Number 10. Captain Kidd's Treasure. Former pirate hunter turned vicious pirate, Captain Kidd's life story is potential Hollywood gold. He even has one of the most famous MacGuffins of all time, a haul of treasure stolen by Kidd and missing for over 3 centuries. At least it was, until May 2015, when a group of explorers led by Barry Clifford discovered it off the coast of Madagascar. In 1695, Kidd had been put in charge of the adventurer galley with an express mission to hunt down pirates. When catching professional plunderers turned out to be more difficult than simply becoming one, Kidd allegedly switched sides and loaded his vessel with stolen booty. Kidd's glorious adventure only lasted 3 years, when he had to sink adventure galley off the coast of Madagascar after it had become unseaworthy. There it lay until 2015, when Clifford and his team finally dived in and found a gigantic haul of silver. At the time of writing, only 1 bar had been displayed, but boy is it a big one. Roughly the size of an adult's forearm and engraved with the letters S and T, it is suspected to have originated in Bolivia. Although it almost certainly belonged to Kidd, experts are urging caution until a closer analysis can be made. If Clifford's team turns out to be right, their find will go down as one of the biggest in history.
Before we move on, I've got a little challenge for you that will take just 5 seconds to complete. So here's the deal. You just leave a like on this video, smash that subscribe button, and hit the notification bell and you get 25 years of amazing luck. Try it. It really works.
Number 9. Michelangelo's only surviving bronze sculpture. As one of the most studied artists in history, finding new work by Michelangelo should be impossible, or so you would think. In February 2015, academics at Cambridge University revealed that 2 bronze statues of muscular men riding panthers naked, originally attributed to Michelangelo's circle, were the work of the master himself. The discovery was the result of detective work worthy of a Dan Brown novel. Last year, a drawing by one of Michelangelo's apprentices was found in France, depicting one of the panther-riding youths. When experts hired an anatomist to investigate further, they found details on the youth's body eerily similar to those on Michelangelo's David. The 6-packs and belly buttons were identical, and the inclusion of a visible peroneal tendon point to a sculptor of high anatomical knowledge. The team then finally made a neutron scan of the bronze, dating them to the first decade of the 16th century, when Michelangelo was on the cusp of fame. This makes the Panther Boys the only surviving bronzes by Michelangelo in the known world. If you're lucky enough to live in Britain, you can even go see them at the Fitzwilliam Museum in Cambridge. Number 8. Charles Darwin's Lost Fossils. In 2012, paleontologist Dr. Howard Falcon Lang made the chance discovery of a lifetime. Digging through the vaults of the British Geological Survey HQ, he came across a cabinet drawer marked Unregistered Fossils. Opening it, he found a collection of beautiful glass slides containing cross-sections of forgotten fossils. This alone probably would have been exciting enough, but then Dr. Falcon Lang noticed the signature, C. Darwin, Esquire. Rather than being random old slides, the fossils were the very samples Charles Darwin had picked up on his Beagle voyage while forming the theory of evolution. Back in 1846, they wound up in the hands of his friend Joseph Hooker, who was trying to build a collection. Unfortunately for posterity, Hooker failed to register the slides and then vanished off into an expedition to the Himalayas. Without telling anyone about them, the collection was packed up while he was away and moved to a new location. In the confusion, everyone forgot all about the invaluable Darwin samples for 165 years. Number 7. Walt Disney's first Christmas movie. In 1931, Disney released Mickey's Orphans, a Christmas-based tale starring a certain iconic mouse that is now considered an early classic. Not many know that it was based on an earlier film. Empty Socks was released in 1927 and was long considered lost. So culturally important was this missing film that the few surviving frames were preserved in the Museum of Modern Art in New York. That all changed in 2014 when archivists at the National Library of Norway unexpectedly stumbled across a copy. Running across 2 reels for a total of 5.5 minutes, the Norwegian version of Empty Socks was only 30 to 60 seconds short of being complete. At some point, someone working at the library had messed up labeling it, and its existence was forgotten. Its recovery was fantastic news for film historians and Disney fans. Empty Socks featured Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, who would go on to inspire the most famous Disney creation of all time, Mickey Mouse. Seeing him made in a story that would later be remade with Mickey allowed experts to see clearly how Walt Disney's ideas evolved over the years. There's no word yet as to when someone will finally put a version on YouTube. Number 6. Georges Perec's Lost Novel. For decades, fans of the French avant-garde novelist Georges Perec had been tormented by a throwaway reference in his semi-autobiographical novel, W. In one of the tantalizing passages, Perec briefly described his first unpublished book, Portrait of a Man. Yet when Perec died, no copy of the manuscript was found. As the author of one of the greatest novels of the 20th century, Life, a User's Manual, a new book by Perec would have been an invaluable cultural treasure. Its absence sparked a search through his papers that turned up nothing but blanks for over 30 years. Then one day, a former journalist just happened to mention to a Perec expert over dinner that a friend had once lent him some of Perec's writing. He offered to show it to the expert and promptly handed him the sole surviving copy of Portrait of a Man. It was the literary equivalent of an acquaintance casually tossing the first draft of the Mona Lisa into your lap. By 2014, Portrait of a Man had been copied, translated, and finally published, nearly 40 years after readers first heard of its existence. Number 5. Vivaldi's Lost Opera. Although he's most famous for the Four Seasons, pretty much everything to come from Vivaldi's pen was unqualified genius. His opera Orlando Furioso is no exception. A masterpiece composed in 1727, it's the sort of work that drives opera lovers into a dignified frenzy with its raw power. Yet the version most people know is actually a remake. In 2012, researchers discovered a version in Vivaldi's papers dating from 13 years earlier. It was long known that an Orlando opera had been staged at Vivaldi's theater in 1714 and had been a massive hit. It was also known that Vivaldi kept a copy of this opera in his personal papers, but somehow, no one had put 2 and 2 together, and it was instead cataloged as the work of a Bolognese composer, Giovanni Alberto Ristori. It was only when a leading scholar decided to investigate why Vivaldi kept a copy of Ristori's work that it was discovered he didn't. The opera was Vivaldi's all along. Number 4. Britain's Most Wanted Missing Film. One of the most terrifying statistics ever released is the claim by the Library of Congress that 75% of all silent films are lost forever. In Britain, that number rises to 80%. Even bona fide geniuses like Hitchcock have missing films. So when experts stumbled across one of the most sought-after British films in a Dutch blacksmith's garage, it felt like the haul of a century. Directed by George Pearson, Love, Life and Laughter had been at the top of the British Film Institute's most wanted list for years. Directed in 1923, it starred Britain's Queen of Happiness, Betty Balfour, in a role critics claimed would be remembered for centuries. Instead, the film's surviving print wound up gathering dust in a small-town theater in Holland, before being given to a local blacksmith when the theater closed. It then moldered in his garage for decades, until his relatives bequeathed it to the Dutch film museum I, who told them exactly what they've been sitting on all this time. The film is extra important because it doubles the amount of existing films directed by Pearson, a man known as Britain's D.W. Griffith. With 2 surviving films, we can now finally see if he really was any good or not. Number 3. Neil Armstrong's Apollo 11 Artifacts. The footage of Neil Armstrong's first steps on the moon may be the most iconic piece of film history. Yet for decades and decades, we were unaware that he had an artifact connected with it here on Earth. Then 2 years after Armstrong died, his wife discovered an old bag hidden at the bottom of a closet. Inside was the camera the Apollo 11 crew used to record mankind's first footsteps on the moon. Aside from being a physical reminder of our species' greatest collective achievement to date, the find was awesome because the camera was meant to be lost forever. After the mission was over, the camera and other bits and pieces of the bag were supposed to have been left in the Eagle module. The Eagle never made it back to Earth. By rights, that camera should have been laying in a pile of wreckage somewhere on the surface of the moon. It turned out that Armstrong had deliberately smuggled it back to Earth disguised as 10 pounds of LM miscellaneous equipment. He told Michael Collins the bag contained nothing but trash, and apparently NASA believed him. Armstrong never once spoke about the priceless memento he was hiding in his closet. The camera is now on display at the National Air and Space Museum. Number 2. A lost Leonardo painting. Despite being possibly the greatest artist to have ever lived, the number of surviving works we have by Da Vinci is absurdly small. Depending on who's counting, we have somewhere between 15 to 17 of his paintings. By comparison, we have dozens of Michelangelo, and even more of Raphael. In 2011, this tiny total got a significant boost. After years of analysis, experts declared Leonardo had painted the Salvator Mundi, a picture of Christ holding a glass orb in one hand. The Salvator Mundi was long considered to be one of Leonardo's many lost works. It was described in a collection of 17th century documents, but after that, it seemed to fall off the face of the earth. Unlike the Battle of Vanguardia or the Mona Lisa, a nude Mona Lisa, which we knew had been destroyed, Salvator Mundi's disappearance was always considered a mystery. Then, a few years ago, a consortium of businessmen bought a murky painting of Christ long considered to be the Salvator Mundi knockoff. After paying to have it cleaned and restored, they discovered that the glass orb in Christ's hand was painted really well. In fact, it showed such great technical skill that scholars declared it could only be done by Da Vinci. The attribution handed the world another painting by the Renaissance master. Unfortunately, it's currently held by a Russian billionaire, so good luck ever seeing it in the flesh. Number 1. Writings of Chinese history. Every so often in human history, something is rediscovered that could potentially change the world. One example is when scholars rediscovered the works of the Greeks and Romans, ushering in the Renaissance. Another could be the discovery of the Tsinghua bamboo slips, a collection of ancient bamboo pieces covered in Chinese characters. The slips contain some of the earliest Chinese writings ever uncovered. Along with 2 similar hauls dating back to 1993, they seem to represent a school of Eastern literature and science completely forgotten by the world. Perhaps most importantly, they predate the first Qin emperor by nearly a century. In 213 BC, the emperor ordered all books to be banned and scholars to be murdered. The result was a grand loss of knowledge and culture, as thousands of irreplaceable texts went up in smoke. Fast forward to today, and we may finally be getting some of them back. Already, analysis of the 3 manuscript hauls has revealed the earliest known version of I Ching, new text by Confucius, and a prototype version of the Taoist Book of the Way, with major differences from later editions. It also uncovered the oldest use of a decimal multiplication table in history, with as many treasures only now starting to make their way into public consciousness. It's even been suggested we may soon see a wholesale rewriting of Chinese cultural history. Not bad for a bunch of moldy old bamboo strips.